Good morning. Welcome to First Unitarian Universalist Church of Rochester. We're a congregation that finds truth and inspiration from many spiritual paths and sources. And in community, we help each other practice justice, inclusion, and love. Your faith, your doubts, your questions, your hopes for our world, and your identity are welcome here. You can find ways to get involved in the life of the church in your bulletin and stay up to date with all that's happening by signing up for the weekly e-news. Children are welcome in the sanctuary at any time. There's also a preschool playroom and activities for children following the story. And all can join us after service for refreshment and conversation down in the Commons. Today, down in the Commons, we also have the Social Justice Fair, a chance to learn about various groups that are within our church working for more justice and inclusion both within and beyond our walls. You can learn about their work, how to get involved, as well as share about your own work in the wider community or learn about what others are doing beyond those groups as well. So join us after service downstairs in the Commons. Each month, our offering goes out the doors of our congregation to organizations working for justice in the community. For the month of November, we're collecting for the Village Agricultural Cooperative, a local nonprofit working at the intersection of food sustainability and sustainably grown food and providing resources and food for those folks who are food insecure. So thank you for your generosity. You can give as a plates pass during the service or any time online throughout this month. A couple of quick scheduling notes for this week. Tuesday evening at 7 o'clock, you can join the interfaith community for a joint Thanksgiving service at Christ United Methodist Church. I'm grateful to participate each year with them. So that's 7 o'clock Tuesday night, followed by tables filled with pie, which hasn't happened for a couple years now. So we are grateful for the return of pie Tuesday night. You can join us there. And then Thursday, if you're looking for a place to gather, you can join the UU Friendsgiving here at church. You can see the large sign-up board down in the lobby and join with others this Thursday here. And next week, Sunday, November 27th, please note that we have one service only at 10 a.m. So if you come at 9, you'll have a nice, quiet, meditative time here in the sanctuary for a while, and service will be at 10 o'clock. So that's next week. And then the following week, we return to 2 services as usual. Thank you to Tom Weber, a member here, and also a journalist, for offering a reflection this morning about some of the history of our church in Rochester and Unitarian Universalism and some of the intersections there. Thank you for saying yes to offering a reflection today. And finally, a special thank you to our guest musicians, the OK Factor, who have been here before. Yes, highly acclaimed. It's been a little while since you've been here, pre-COVID days, but you can hear their music online. They didn't bring any items to sell today, but you can look them up online as well. Beautiful music. They're also currently serving as interim co-directors of music at White Bear UU Church in the Twin Cities, as well as touring many places with many fabulous musicians. So we're so grateful for you being here this morning on a cold drive down, I'm sure. So I invite you to take a breath as we enter this time of worship together with these words from the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, our minister in the 1870s. May our faith in humanity and our message of hope and good cheer light our way. It's good to be together. I invite you now to rise in body or spirit and greet those around you, greet those online as well. And in just a moment, our music will call us back together. We are grateful throughout the year to welcome new members to our congregation, and I invite those who are joining this morning to please come forward and join Melissa and I up here on the chancel. Come on up. When we welcome new members, it's seemingly a simple act of putting pen to paper, signing a name, and saying welcome. And yet, and still, something more powerful happens than it seems. It's a commitment of hearts to hearts, of joining into a community and reconsecrating our commitment to who we are in the world, what values we are called to, naming and honoring new souls among us in the larger family of all souls.
This morning, we welcome this group into our spiritual home and into the wider world of Unitarian Universalism. I'll have you just kind of wave as I say your name. Susan D. Bleak, Zach DeRoyne, Bethany Nolt, Travis Nolt, Anna Rybakowskis, and Matthew Rybakowskis. We come together as members and friends of this spiritual community. We covenant to engage each other with kindness and courage and love. And in honor of these new members, we light this chalice as a symbol of our community, our covenant, and our faith together.
So I invite you to look at this congregation and you here and into the camera as well, to those online. And know that this is a home for your soul. May you find here kindred spirits for the work of justice and inclusion and love. I invite the congregation to join in the litany of welcome. It's on the screen, or it's also in your order of service. First, the congregation. We welcome you into this congregation and into the larger circle of Unitarian Universalism. We welcome your story, your identity, and the gifts that you bring. May you find here a home for your soul. And new members.
We gladly join with you as members of this church. We will offer our gifts as we are able to the flourishing and well-being of this community and support the values of this congregation: hospitality, compassion, spiritual growth, and justice.
And all together,
we covenant to travel together in this religious community. Here may we be affirmed for who we are and challenged to be our best selves. Here may we grow our souls, care for each other and the earth, nurture spiritual growth, practice justice, and together lead lives of meaning, service, and love.
And we bid you welcome. So as they sign the membership book, we will sing a blessing to them. And as you sign, I invite you to consider all the names that have come before you and all the blank lines that are after yours for new souls who will still find us in this congregation of over 150 years of members who have made this family of all souls. We'll sing together.
And we need a pen. Hold on.
So this month we've been talking all about change. And one of the things about change is it takes courage. And in 2 weeks, we will get to meet some amazing humans who are making courageous changes in their own lives and the lives of others when we meet this year's Guest at the Table box. So look for the boxes in 2 weeks, and we can learn all about those amazing humans. But today, we're going to learn about another new friend, and his name is Little Tree. And it's a book by Lauren Long, written and illustrated by Lauren Long. And Little Tree isn't quite sure how to change, but still stay who he really is. So we're going to learn about Little Tree. Once there was a little tree filled with leaves, who was surrounded by other little trees who had leaves of their own. In the heart of long summer days, Little Tree's leaves kept him cool. The squirrels would climb up on the branches to play, and the mourning dove landed in him and sang her beautiful song. The little tree was sure to grow up big and strong. Autumn arrived, and cool winds filled the air. The wind tickled the leaves as it passed through his branches and ruffled them. The air grew cold, and the leaves and all of the trees changed beautiful colors, becoming yellow and red and orange. Then one by one, the trees began to drop their leaves. But not Little Tree. He just hugged his leaves tight. "Hello, Little Tree," said a squirrel. "You're supposed to drop your leaves now." But Little Tree was unsure. What would he do without his leaves? Winter came. "What are you doing with the leaves still on?" asked the doe. And Little Tree just hugged his leaves tighter. Springtime arrived, and the forest burst into life again. The other trees grew bright new leaves, and the squirrels played in their branches. Little Tree could hear the mourning dove singing her fluty song. The seasons continued to come and go. "Little Tree," quacked a duck, "your leaves are brown. Are you feeling sick?" A fox said, "Little Tree, it's autumn. It's time for you to drop your leaves. You can do it. 1, 2... But Little Tree just hugged his leaves tight. And as the seasons passed, all around, the forest grew and grew. Then one summer, Little Tree could no longer feel the sunlight. He could see the squirrels playing high above and all the other broad, tall trees. And the mourning dove, she sang so far away that he could hardly hear her singing. Autumn came again, and leaves began to blanket the ground. Little Tree looked up at all the other trees with their branches reaching the skies, and he remembered when all the trees had been his size. And then he decided to let go. As his last leaf floated to the ground, for the first time, Little Tree felt the harsh cold of winter. But do you know what happened next? Spring came and his leaves returned. Then summer came and he flourished. And then another fall and another winter came. And the Little Tree realized that he was really the same tree, no matter the season. As they begin the music, we'll meet over by the door. Thank you.
Good morning. It is good to be with you. I invite you to settle in here as we create a place of communal caring and connection. It's our time to pause amidst the busyness of our lives, to slow down enough to consider the beauty that is here all around us, and to open a space for listening and love. Here, we honor all who support us in this caring, loving, and all-inclusive ministry. We send gratitude to Maggie O'Connell Nolte, serving as our caring coordinator, arranging care for our members and friends in need for the last week. Cynthia Dalby will take over tomorrow for the next 2, and we thank her for that. The members of our caring committee are wonderful examples of our compassionate community, holding us up as we go through challenging and happy times. And life can be challenging. We could all use some extra support with what life throws at us, and if you are experiencing those challenges in your life, we encourage you to reach out for support and help. If you need additional care, whether it be personal pastoral care or other assistance, please reach out to Reverend Luke or myself. And today's flowers are in honor of our member Daryl Waters, whose life was celebrated here yesterday. In this community, we share pieces of our lives with one another. We do this because all people here have value. Each person's experience matters. We lift up those who are experiencing sadness, illness, or loneliness. May the strength and love in our congregation help guide you. We revel in those who are experiencing joys in their lives. May their happiness lift us all, and may their joy filter into all around them. May all of us find love, hope, joy, and healing strength in our community. And this morning we hold Randy Stone in our hearts with the news of his father's passing. Ed Stone died at age 94 on November 17th. He had several chronic illnesses and had struggled for the past 5 to 6 years, but rapidly declined in the 2 days before he passed. Randy and Kim were able to be with him last weekend, shortly before his passing. He lived in Gurnee, Illinois, and was a UU for almost 70 years. We hold the entire family and all who knew Ed in our thoughts. Here, our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith is our focus. Let us carry that into the wider world. May the faith and the spirit of life, love for the community of earth, and love for the light in each other be ours now and in all the days to come.
I invite you to take a deep breath. Breathe deep the breath of life. Feel below you the earth and its ancient turning, and above you the sky, and beyond that the stars shining with their ancient light, holding you in this moment, this breath, you yourself made of earth and stars. Know that in this house you are named, you are known as beloved, as sacred. I invite you into this time of meditation, this time of prayer, first by sharing silence together. Spirit of life, source of love, God of many names and beyond all naming. Each morning reminds us of the fragile beauty of this world, the quick shifts in the air and the seasons, not unlike the quick shifts of the heart. When some news reaches us across distance, in our world, in our own homes, like news this morning from Colorado of yet more violence toward LGBTQ folks, especially on this Trans Day of Remembrance, in a country saturated with weaponry for generations. We still long for an ache for peace and inclusion and a love that knows no bounds. Each day it seems too many reasons to name, to be weary, and each day, just as many reasons to name to be grateful. Help us find our way in the in-betweenness of it all that can take us from joy to sorrow and back between every breath, and remind us that it is in that living, with an open heart, moved to compassion sometimes, moved to sorrow, but also moved to joy, that there is no other way to be filled and sustained with life than the open heart. In this sacred hour, we hold our joys and sorrows, our own and others, known and unknown. I invite you to bring the names you're holding this day in your own heart, in joy or sorrow, celebration or concern, and silently or aloud now in this time to speak their names. For all those joys and sorrows, named and unnamed, may we all be held in love. These words of meditation are from Mary Oliver as we prepare to gather around many different tables this week and many different stories to remember the muddy blessings of earth and community and life. She writes, I don't want you to just sit at the table. I don't want you to just eat and be content. I want you to walk into the fields where the water is shining and the rice has risen. I want you to stand there far from the white tablecloth, and I want you to fill your hands with mud like a blessing. May our hands and lives be filled with the blessings of this world full of possibility and life. Amen.
Luke asked me to say a few words today. He didn't define words, or few, so get comfortable. I got hooked on history as a child during the Civil War centennial of the 1960s. It was thrilling as a boy to read about that timeless struggle between good and evil. But I'm not interested in history just for the entertainment aspect of it, the exciting events, the heroes, and the tragic figures. Rather, in the way some people turn to the scriptures or nature or Twitter to seek answers and comfort in a confounding world, I like to turn to history. I often look to the past to try to understand the present. For as President Harry Truman liked to say, the only thing new in the world is the history you don't know. Sometimes the history you do know is frightening enough, as we have found out in recent years. But I always think that somewhere in the past there has to be an explanation for what has gone wrong and an answer as to why things sometimes turn out right. Can we find the pattern that will unlock that mystery? The downside is that to rummage around in the past for those answers is often to enter a spell of wistfulness, of heartbreak, of bittersweet knowledge tinted by a sense of loss. I am troubled by the questions of how, why not, what if? What if, for one example, Dallas had never happened? That one has haunted me since my childhood. So as I've moved through my UU journey of 4 decades now, I've turned frequently to the history of our movement to see how we have arrived where we find ourselves. How by turning, have we come down right where we ought to be? It has gratified me to read about the efforts of our UU ancestors in the fights against slavery, for women's rights in the anti-war and civil rights movements of the 60s, and later for same-sex marriage. So many times we have come down on the right and most humane side of history. I have long thought that the overriding issue in American life is race. It explains so much about our American culture and history, from the availability of guns, to poorly funded public schools, to state-sponsored capital punishment, to our lack of universal health care. Have we, as UUs, done enough to address this scourge, in particular within our own churches? In the wake of the Black Lives Matter movement, the efforts of 2 Unitarian congregations in the South to remove the name of Thomas Jefferson from their churches present an example of how we might rigorously examine our history. Here in Rochester, the Reverend Eliza Tupper Wilkes, who we quote every Sunday, was as much of an evangelist as a Unitarian Universalist can be. She founded churches in the Midwest and on the West Coast and inspired other women to become ministers. That was a long time ago, and it shows that our church has been active in this community almost from the start. We have engaged in this work of social justice and healing and activism for nearly as long as many of our brethren churches in New England. I would like to know more about the Reverend Owen Eames, minister of this church in the 1920s, who spoke out publicly and forcefully in defense of evolution science and against the teaching of creationism in Minnesota schools and colleges. It's fun to remember that when the evangelist Billy Sunday held a revival here in 1905 and invited all Rochester churches to participate, ours declined the invitation because of his, quote, virulent attacks on our faith. It's also worth remembering that we have often reached out to the community to provide comfort and aid. As in 1965, when a major flood struck Rochester and the Red Cross used our downtown church as a temporary shelter for families left homeless by the devastation. And speaking of what ifs, this is a big one. What if the planned college to be located in the 1850s atop College Hill, now known as Pill Hill, had come to fruition? The local group proposing development of the college was working with the Heidekoper family, the founders of Meadville Unitarian Seminary in Pennsylvania. Imagine Rochester as Meadville West, educating generations of ministers to serve our congregations across the nation. I often wonder if exploring the past makes one either anxious or optimistic about the future. We talk frequently about Unitarian minister Theodore Parker's belief that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I do know that the forces of power and oppression never willingly leave the field of conflict. They do not operate with an internal clock that says, okay, our time is up, now let's allow the arc to bend a little bit more. In reality, that arc bends only through our efforts to apply our influence, our energy, and our activism to the scale. I've also come to believe that we humans have an unlimited capacity for goodness, but that our desire to exercise that capacity often falls short. The necessary inspiration and energy to do so can come from looking at and learning from those who came before us. Their struggles in the past, unfortunately, largely remain our struggles today. Isn't it funny how history hangs around like that?
This reading is an excerpt from Conflict Resolution for Holy Beings by Joy Harjo. First, set conflict resolution ground rules. Recognize whose lands these are on which we stand. Ask the deer, turtle, and the crane. Make sure the spirits of these lands are respected and treated with goodwill. The land is a being who remembers everything. You will have to answer to your children and their children and theirs. The red shimmer of remembering will compel you up the night to walk the perimeter of truth for understanding. As I brushed my hair over the hotel sink to get ready, I heard, by listening, we will understand who we are in this holy realm of words. Do not parade, pleased with yourself. You must speak in the language of justice. Second, use effective communication skills that display and enhance mutual trust and respect. They said, if you sign this paper, we will become brothers. We will no longer fight. We will give you this land and these waters as long as the grass shall grow and the rivers run. The lands and waters they gave us did not belong to them to give. Under false pretenses, we signed. With a mass of gunpowder pointed at us, we signed. With a flotilla of warships at our shores, we signed. We are still signing. We have found no peace in this act of signing. We say, put down your papers, your tools of coercion, your false promises, your posture of superiority, and sit with us before the fire. We will share food, songs, and stories. We will gather beneath starlight and dance and rise together at sunrise. Next, reduce defensiveness and break the defensiveness chain. You cannot legislate music to lockstep, nor can you legislate the spirit of the music to stop at political boundaries, or poetry, or art, or anything that is of value or matters in this world and the next worlds. This is about getting to know each other. We will wind up back at the blues, standing on the edge of the flatted fifth, about to jump into a fierce understanding together. Next, use what you learn to resolve your own conflicts and to mediate others' conflicts. When we made it back home, back over those curved roads that wind through the city of peace, we stopped at the doorway of dusk as it opened to our homelands. We gave thanks for the story, for all parts of the story, because it was by the light of those challenges we knew ourselves. We asked for forgiveness. We laid down our burdens next to each other.
Thank you for that gift of music. I was thinking this week as we prepare for so many gatherings, and I was thinking about the tradition each year where we start gathering the little boxes for the UU Service Committee that Amy mentioned that are coming soon. It reminded me growing up of the jars that were around our house, and one that I still have now, though it doesn't fill up very quick. The jars of gathered change from the pocket that comes from the broken bills, and you gather up all those coins, and in each small box or collection bank of some kind, saving up for this or that, or just holding space until you take the time to count it or to bring it to a bank that still has counting machines, maybe, for change. For me, growing up, that little jar was a jar of possibility, to save those coins for whatever I could imagine. Usually it was Legos, or who am I kidding? Most of the time it was candy at the gas station. But it was a little simple logic for me, maybe some larger meaning for us, that to make change, which is our monthly theme, something has to break. Whether you need to break a bill or you break a story, some standard currency that holds together a culture, and once it breaks, something certainly is lost. But at least from my child's mind, it was that breaking that opened up to some shining possibility. These questions, how, why not, and what if, that Tom lifted up, as guiding his interest somewhere between optimistic, pessimistic, realist, anxious, interested exploration of history in our community and beyond, those are good questions to ask all the time. How, why not, and what if? I wonder, too, about some of our own mixed history in this tradition or in this church. Why did we not? Why not have another woman minister after Eliza Tupper Wilkes in the 1870s for over 100 years? No different than any other mainline denomination who we think we're often quite ahead of in justice work and inclusion. How is a good question about how did our spiritual ancestors in the same decade that Reverend Owen was supporting evolution and against creationism, in that same decade, the Reverend Homer Gleason, serving this church in the 1920s, proudly and publicly and strongly supported eugenics. How? Or what if is a good question too. What if our little Universalist church downtown wasn't influenced by the emergence of humanism? The idea that you can have religion and spiritual community without the necessity of having to believe in a self-conscious God. This belief was prominently started in Minneapolis at First Unitarian Society in the 19-teens. Notice, just before eugenics. Complicated. Anyway, what if our little church wasn't influenced by that beautiful, expansive movement for reason and rationality in an era that did not welcome it often? And we continued on in our liberal-ish sort of universalist Christianity only, which included weekly communion and the Lord's Prayer and biblical readings each week. I have an order of service on my desk from 1908 that has all of those things that most of you would be a little confused if we handed out that order of service on a Sunday morning now. What if we had not opened our spiritual perspectives to a wider embrace of many spiritual paths? How many of you, how many of us would still be here on Sunday mornings? Or what if our little church didn't build a new one and then another new one and then another new one because of changing times and need? What if there was never enough space created for how many of us are here now? We wouldn't be in this space that has nurtured this congregation to well over twice its size and more since we built this space. All these stories mixed up together and lots of good questions. And these words from Joy Harjo, Indigenous poet and writer, who says we give thanks for the story, for all parts of the story, because it was by the light of those challenges that we knew ourselves and we asked for forgiveness and we laid down our burdens next to each other. All parts of the story are sometimes a little complicated, often very cringy, sometimes hard to navigate. What do we give passes on in our history and what don't we? What do we say, oh, they were just a product of their time? And what do we simply condemn because not everybody in that time ended up as that kind of product? What is the balance of grace and humility for others, for ancestors, for ourselves, of thinking we are better than those horrible people in the past? Maybe in some ways, yes. In many ways, probably not. And almost always somewhere in between. I believe it is good to know, as the poet writes, whose land you are on. This means many things to me. It means knowing and exploring our complex histories, our lineages for good and ill, to grapple with the ethics of who we come from and the legacy of those ethics. This means knowing that we gather almost anywhere in this country on land that was either stolen or broken treaties created what it is now, or under forced treaties, as Anne read about, that were neither fair nor just. It means holding the reality that, yes, many people and places and lands have been stolen and taken from others over time. It has happened among many cultures and traditions and histories all over the world, and yet there's no denying the fact that white settlers are almost universally the most recent colonizers to seize and to have kept stolen and broken treaty land from indigenous people here in Minnesota and beyond. We know this. Just because the people from whom the land was taken maybe had done it to someone else or weren't perfect, or that lots of people in other times or places have done it before, doesn't make it okay. If we believe in a moral arc of the universe bending toward justice, which Tom's on the fence about, and most of us are, this phrase powerfully used by the Reverend Dr. King, who is referencing Unitarian Theodore Parker, as Tom mentioned, who was, even as an abolitionist, still believed people of color were inferior to whites. These are complicated people and histories. If we believe, though, that there is some moral arc that's ethically necessary to know and reflect on the wholeness of our history and then do better, as much as we know how, knowing it won't be perfect and we'll make mistakes and we have work to do constantly, then we invest time in building relationships, of making amends and reparations, and at the very basic spiritual, ethical level, of trying to be a good human being. To know that there are many parts of the stories, proud and otherwise, and wrestling with them, grappling with them, as most of us likely do this week of Thanksgiving every year, honoring them as part of who we are and what we're called to. It means knowing that for good change to happen and mutual flourishing in the health and wellness and care of our communities and one another, of being sure there is room at the table for everyone. Room at the table for all the stories. Room at the table of love and welcome. It means good change comes only from breaking the standard stories, the Pollyanna whitewashed narratives, and sinking our souls into the sacred, muddy, messy, holy ground on which we live and breathe and have our being. on which we are all always guests, as indigenous traditions would remind us. You must ask the animals, the creatures of the earth, about whose land you are on. As we enter this week, and gatherings for many of you, I am sure, around many different tables, either filled to the brim or grievingly empty, there's many stories and complex stories of love and pain, histories known and unknown, or that you find out in the middle of dinner and you're like, didn't know that part of the family history. So as we enter these times, I'm resting in these words from another beautiful piece by today's poet, Joy Harjo, that I share often this time of year, and I'm liking to try to know it by heart. She writes, "The world begins at a kitchen table. No matter what, you have to eat to live. The gifts of the earth are brought and prepared, set on the table, so it has been since creation, and it will go on. We chase chickens or dogs away from it. Babies teethe at the corners. They scrape their knees under it. It is here that our children are given instructions on what it means to be human. And our dreams drink coffee with us as they put their arms around our children, and they laugh with us at our poor falling down selves, and as we put ourselves back together again at the table. At the table we sing with joy and with sorrow. We pray of suffering and remorse, and we give thanks." She says, "Perhaps the world will end at the kitchen table, while we are all laughing and crying and eating of the last sweet bite. May we tell all our stories, every beautiful and broken part, so that in the end we will all have space at the table. So in the end, all are fed. May it be so. Amen." The hymn, as we're going to sit at the welcome table, Olivia and Carla will lead us. Invite you, as you're comfortable, to place a hand on your heart or toward the sky or the earth in gratitude. And I offer this blessing that we sing here around our tables Wednesday nights. Maybe you sing at home too, if you're learning it. Give thanks for the sun, for the water and land, for the love in our hearts and the work of our hands, for the table that's set and this meal that we share. Let us hold one another in love and in care. May the tables be filled with welcome and love and care. Amen.
Thank you.